Welcome to Branching Out, Growing Together, the podcast that brings you inspiring stories from people ready to take bold steps, grow new opportunities, and transform their land or careers into something extraordinary. Hosted by Melanie Jones, each episode features farmers, entrepreneurs, and visionaries sharing their journeys of discovery and growth. Whether you're dreaming of starting your own farm or looking for new ways to cultivate success, you're in the right place. It's time to branch out and grow together.
Every now and then you step into a piece of land and feel something deeper taking root. That's exactly how I felt at Pick and Grin Farms here in Western Kentucky. I spent some time with Megan and Willie Huston, who are growing more than food. They're growing a new way forward, and it really made an impact on me. So in this episode, we explore what it really means to observe and respond to the land's unique rhythms. Willie shares how their farm blends silvopasture, wild foraging, and biomimicry to regenerate not just the soil, but the spirit. And right alongside the fruit trees, the wildflowers, and the rotationally grazed livestock, you'll find chestnut trees. And these are trees that started at EBB Farms and were eventually planted by Willie. Quietly, steadfastly, a symbol of long-term thinking in a world too often forgetting to look ahead. This episode is about connection to the land, to legacy, and to each other. It's about resisting quick fixes and leaning into the messy, beautiful work of restoration and resilience. And if this is a new topic for you, I think it's something you may want to dig just a little deeper into. It's really important in our earth right now. If you've ever felt called to do something that matters on your own land or in your own way, this story will remind you that you're not alone. Seeing what Willie's building on his farm reignited a flame in me to help more people find a path to their own land, to their own legacy, and to their own place to grow. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. Good morning, Willie. Thanks for joining Branching Out.
Good morning. Yes, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So we're going to call the name of this episode Regenerative Farming, Curiosity, and Connection to the Land. And having had the privilege to visit your farm a couple of times, actually, I know that you're focused on all three of these, and they're kind of interrelated. So it's just a wonderful story to tell people. I also wanted to note that for the listeners who've been following us for a couple of years, we try to live branching out and growing together and doing new things. So this is the first podcast that we're creating where I actually had the opportunity to visit your farm and create some video snippets that we'll insert into the podcast. So that makes it even a little bit more fun and different. So when I was out there at your place, Pick and Grin Farm, I noticed that you use the term observation quite a bit.
Mm.
And so when you first started Pick and Grin, like what did you observe? How did you start a farm?
Yeah, I had one of my mentors. He lives down in Mississippi, High Hope Farms. Johnny Ray is his name. He was a big inspiration. He handed me the right book about 15 years ago uh, that Wendell Berry had written called The Unsettling of America, Culture and Agriculture. And then from there, it just snowballed in all kinds of different, other books that were related and just ate that up like crazy. Started going to conferences everywhere with in regards to regenerative farming. And so it gained kind of this like steam of, but the one thing in that, the one piece is like wherever your piece of land's, because my piece of land is what it needs is different than just like what I see across the way or the other holler or the other hillside. It's could be totally and often is totally different than what needs to be done here. So instead of trying to impose my will for what I wanted and a specific crop or whatever, I tried to that first year take notes, walk around and figure out, let it come to me and what was already there. So one thing I noticed our first year, I discovered these Phoenix oysters. They're these big, beautiful mushrooms on a stump, and it was in the fall, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And I like to tell that story just because nowadays there's all these books being written, all this research being done about the fungi and the roots of trees and plants and how important it is for their communication, for water retention, for mining minerals and sharing minerals and building soil. So it's kind of this neat little circle, that's I've got back to on that mycelial hyphae level with the trees I'm incorporating into the silvopasture system.
Yeah, it sounds like you said, you didn't go out on a journey to find mushrooms. They kind of presented themselves to you, and that's one way you've built your farm, I think, is just feeling connected to the land. Wouldn't that
Mm.
be true?
Oh, no, no, that's absolutely true. And I even still 10 years later, essentially, I'm still practicing that. And, every other couple days, I remind myself of that, like just keep listening and being inspired with what the land needs. Because, yet even trying to attempting to do that and doing my best to do that very intentionally, there's still deficiencies, right? There's still things I need to, make more efficient or instill more proper to what the soil needs and things. So I mean, I'm lifelong grower. Like a lot of these other like the things I'm growing. I mean, it just takes a lot of time and just this consistent effort to stay polished in that observation way.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you didn't really start with a master plan, like here's my square of what I'm going to do. Did you or
I guess no, I didn't have this master like business plan or I didn't have this master. The only thing I had was these like major goals, I guess you could say.
perfect?
Partly a dream too. My calling, I like to say that my calling found me because it's a calling. And so I feel lucky. I feel like privileged in that way. And so this is a vocation. And it took a long journey to get to that point. And I feel like, so I had like these main goals, and one of them, a couple of them were to do these things that, there was an eco-based perspective, like goal first, and to create hope in hopes that it would like, you know, um, increase the health of this land. Because I like restoration farming even more than I do the term regenerative farming, because regenerative suggests that it's this futurist, it's building something that will be instilled and last and be able to be passed on. But restoration farming is mostly what I had to, that's where we are having to start, I think, unfortunately, in our world currently, is we have to restore something first.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
totally right. Totally right.
yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that I was so excited to visit your farm and to tell your story here, because I just think there's a large part of our population that would love to think that they could do this, you know? And so okay, I know that you love Wendellberry, and he had a great impact on you. And that was one of the reasons, I think, observation, like he talks about that, right? Well, seeing what's happening on the land and so forth. Um, you and I met, and my husband Brad too, when you came out to EBB Farms and purchased some chestnut trees. But you have a lot more than chestnut trees on your farm. So talk about what that is.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so the great thing about, finding you all is that the proximity, obviously, and I was surprised, really it was a great surprise, when I was able to connect those dots. But I'm the reason why I chose chestnuts, so I plant them on these 15-foot contour swells, and they're wildflower strips as well on 40-foot spacing. Um, Eventually, so I've got them in tree tubes, and I've covered up the weed mats with the wood chips and everything. And I rotate the cows every day in these quarter-acre strips that are 40-foot wide in between. And so that's the silvopasture system. And so what I'm trying to do in between those, I sprouted out in my greenhouse and planted persimmons in between each one of those, and then mulberries on the edge. Um, which kind of mimics Tree Agriculture by J. Russell Smith. It's a book he wrote during the FDR administration where they were instilling these kind of programs on small plots. And farmers were doing it this way, and it was
Mhm.
very efficient at one point for small farmers. Um, but this is to create, shade over time. The mycelium on the roots actually help the grasses grow in the grazing alleyway strips, and then it's going to provide fodder. They even a lot of the stuff they can eat the leaves off of even, but when there's low food midsummer or something. But then also there's this potential U-pick situation down the road. And I'm also doing like a tree trust thing where people are purchasing um, like these little tree tags I'm putting on the trees for a memorial tree. And so I always try to do like at least three
It's
things with
awesome.
each crop. And so to create resiliency, to create this like short-term, mid-term, long-term, thing with each one. Because I'm trying to do this whole system, seasonal crop, and they each kind of help their kind of insurance for one another through the year as well. So yeah, so I fell in love with the deciduous forest, and just I would have put. So I love oak trees. I feed acorns to the pigs and things like that. I would have, mixed in more of those maybe, but they can be toxic if cows eat too many acorns. So I
Mm.
said, and a lot of these other nut trees and things that in a controlled situation like that, even though it mimics the wild, it's a biomimicry situation. A lot of the nut trees, I mostly rely on them in the woods in a foraging kind of a way because I make some hickory bark syrup and different things that I sell as well. But they take so long to produce.
Yeah.
And the great thing about chestnuts is, a handful of years they started to produce, at least started. Um, and so and then the pigs love chestnuts, the cows will eat chestnuts. And then, obviously the U-pick situation as well. So there's all these, it's just, trying to kill two birds with one stone kind of thing um, yeah. And so what's nice about that is also with those trees, the persimmon trees. So I do pick persimmons forage and then was selling them to a brewery in Nashville. They were making beer out of it. It's the earliest form of beer. Native Americans used to use
Wow.
persimmons for that. Yeah. So, um,
And your bees.
yes,
Yes.
pollination purposes. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's
Most people don't know. Like right now, so bees get most of their flow from trees that they choose tree blossoms before they will, annual like clovers and things. And right now, like you go over there and you hardly see any of them on the clover right now. And that's because right now they're all over. You walk by a Carolina buckthorn tree right now on the edge of the woods here, and the whole tree's buzzing. I mean, they're all over the Carolina buckthorn right now. So,
See,
um,
that's you observing again. Like every day you're out there, right? Just out
mm,
there working and observing. And
yeah.
we had a friend, Michael Parks, on the podcast a while back, and he was telling me how he just loved to walk through the woods and the chestnuts and listen and stuff. And I said, I'm just learning how to take my AirPods out,
Yeah.
like having there, and I'm not alone. The
Oh, yeah.
population where we need to listen to the birds and the bees, and I love the idea of helping people understand that, starting with myself. So Willie, I know that you love the term biomimicry. How
Mm.
how does that mean anything different than regenerative, or why do you love it?
Yeah, I think it's because I feel like even regenerative is more of a handing off, a passing down, a building something for the future. But biomimicry is a closer term, and it's kind of a slower. It kind of brings me to the present more in the sense of to continue the observation piece of what does the land need or what could it use right now. And it helps me like dig into the whole, what has been here before and what is not good from invasive species. How do I remedy that
Yeah.
to get this piece of land back to where it needs to be? And
So
it keeps all
problem
of the
solving.
species in mind from the beavers in the creek, to the cranes and the wild ducks that are, and the bluebirds that are landing on the chestnut, trees right now that, they, so what are all these things saying now? What does it need now? And that's why I like the biomimicry. And a lot of times that, that doesn't mean, regenerative sometimes can be this term where it's like, it can still be a little bit like, how is this going to benefit me, um, and my family economically? And what can I do, which is great, but like sometimes even regenerative farming, and I've read this a lot, will be taken over by bigger companies eventually, where that term will kind of be stolen, almost like organic was kind of stolen.
Yeah.
Uh, and it could be like a monoculture. If I wanted to do asparagus, which I, in a couple of those wildflower strips or something, which is a real possibility in a couple of them. The problem there, well, it's not depends on how you look at it. See, I've got 130 species of wildflowers in those strips, which, I mean, you saw some of that. They weren't quite blooming yet. They're just starting. And so, but they do that, a new, you know, purple, yellow, white blooms, they come up through the summer. When one's done blooming, the next one will bloom. And they create a certain hue that it's actually attracts the pollinators. That's why they do different colors to the season.
Wow.
Provide food all through the fall until even the goldenrod is like one of the last things. And that's the state flower. So the problem is, if I could still call it regenerative farming if I did asparagus in those strips instead of this mixed species of things that are there already that are
Mm-hmm.
mimicking nature and how and what, because each one of those roots in those wildflowers are doing different things, mining, magnesium, selenium, phosphorus, and they're all doing, different levels of nitrogen and all these things. And they're, helping each other out, which is helping all the other species as well. Even from
It's
eggs, quail eggs.
fascinating, right?
So,
Yeah, just so much to learn. What is it is this a question you can answer? What does a typical day look like?
a typical day is that it's different every day. No. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no, there is a certain amount of going with the flow. Obviously, I mean, I have the plans and what's going to be the next thing on, the agenda, but there's always like when you do one of those things, there's 10 other things that pop up, if
Mm-hmm.
something breaks down or if something breaks and so,
Yeah, I
or,
that it, it's so true that it's to be a farmer is to be a problem solver,
mm,
you know, because there's always
mhm.
something that's not going exactly as planned and you have to improvise or innovate or
Yeah.
something like that. And I could see that there at your place along obviously our farm too.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I think we've lost those skills of intuitiveness and improvising, because they're essential. And I have learned those a lot over the years and gotten better at them and being less stressed in like critical situations and just being able to figure something out on the fly, and
mhm.
making it work, doing, so that takes an incredible amount. There's a certain amount of learning to that.
Yeah, I think it's super important for even this idea of an aging population where everything is so thought out for us that as we get older, we naturally decline a little bit, but staying
Mm,
outside and problem solving and lifting things, it's all just so beneficial for our population. Um,
mm, mhm, mhm.
and then there's the other end of the spectrum. You're like your two girls on the farm. I just want to insert here that the his two adorable twin daughters were playing with the cicadas, and they showed me a game where they throw them. This is for the listeners. You obviously know this. Throw the cicadas at each other to see if they will stick on their clothing. And I said, let's keep Miss Melanie out of that game. I'm not a bug lover yet. But I mean, that's the other end of the spectrum is how are we bringing our children along in the outdoors, you know?
Yeah, I was answering a question the other day. Someone was asking about like how to convince an industrial based model to transition regeneratively. And there's all these things, talked with them about, and I've had these conversations with neighbors that are stuck in that system and want to transition, but there's so many different reasons why. they can't and haven't or won't. But my girls, and so one of the added benefits that's not talked about much is that, yeah, well, like you stay in shape, your mind stays sharp, it's poetry in motion. So you're gonna get these deeper joys. You're with, all these different plants and animals. So loneliness stays at bay.
Yeah.
But then I did bring up the kids. So if there's one thing that I do right in my life, that's it, is that my twin girls love nature. And from bugs to whatever.
To pigs, to cows.
Yeah. And they actually, they help me once in a while. They're starting to get to where they help me like pick out which cow goes in next or something like that. They have great natural intuitiveness, kids do. I think we're losing that because they're two of the only kids in their current school. Like they talk about this stuff. Yeah, and they brought like a cicada to school in their bag. Uh, and the kids are like, it's like when I have on-farm events and field walks, like there's this shock value of like they don't know how to interpret it. They don't know how they feel about it. But then later you hear that they were talking about like when they come out to a birthday party with the girls and they jump in the creek, and they're petting these pigs and doing things. Um, they're in that shock state that not because it's just a lost kind of connectivity that's happened over the last few generations. But it's not, but then later you'll hear that their friends were talking about like how neat it was, which I'm sure when they're teenagers they would, but right now it's essential is what I'm trying to get to. And I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like if that's the biggest blessing out of all of this journey in the end, that will be already just had been worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the videos, we have a couple of cute shots of them with the pigs and just doing what they do. Um, so next topic, we haven't mentioned yet, but that you're a pretty famous banjo player, and you played for Brad and I, which was phenomenal. But how does playing your banjo relate to farming? Like, are there some qualities that come together for you?
Yeah, it's that's where the name of the farm, part of the inspiration for it was. The pick and grin, the music side of things. I don't think, so one of my new mantras to life is, and with this farming and when I'm speaking about it, uh, is that if the land is not inspiring music or poetry of some sort or thoughts that are good, then I must not be doing it right. I must by the land. And so I've continued to incorporate music and gatherings, and we've had, and I'll mention, so I'm doing this thing locally at the Capitol Theater, um, called Small Farm Aid coming up in September 5th, and it's got an artist coming up from Nashville, this signed artist that agreed to do it, to raise funds for a regenerative based, operation and farm. So Retree BG, a lot of the funds will go to this time, and they're doing a lot of great work with planting trees in town after the tornadoes that came through, a few years back and things like that, and some of these crazy winds that keep coming through, the straight lines and all that. So, and so yeah, I feel like I have to continue. One of my better friends in the regenerative farming world who passed away a couple years ago, Toulouse Schuyler, she started the Nashville Food Project years ago and wrote a book right before she died. Well, she had a quote in there about we have to be willing to do as this call, we have to be willing to do things where we don't make money for the sake of the progression of, our call. And so this is that. And speaking of trees, I my journey with trees has been this like this spectacular kind of crazy wild journey on its own. But the Retree BG is great because um, we get our music from originally from nature. That's what I'm trying to get to. So the trees are a big part of that, from the wind to just, and now there's all this research that they have certain, they can like see in their own ways and, them doing these different communication type, things. And so, yeah, and so yeah, so that's, I guess I'm inspired just with different like song ideas and poem ideas, so lyrically even, and I'm always writing them down, whenever I can, however I can, and so I've got notes everywhere, and
That's awesome.
my
That's
phone.
awesome.
So yeah.
I was just going to add that recently I've started helping a little bit here at EBB Farms, and I've been weeding. Like we have thousands of chestnut trees growing,
Mm,
and when I'm out there doing that, it's like some conversion is happening in me that
mm,
I'm looking at every single little tree like you have a life of your own, and it's our job to take care of you from when you're just in the greenhouse to the nursery to out in the land, and
mm,
it really is a privilege, and it's so nurturing. And I'm excited for others to follow in your journey and follow in our journey too, to feel
mm,
those feelings.
mm.
Okay, here's going to touch on the curiosity. So Megan's your wife. She's adorable, and she told us that sometimes you'll be driving along and you'll yell out, I'm going to read it. Those people are rotationally grazing. Let's stop. I want to take a look. So what is that curiosity? Like that the girls are
Mm.
like, ah, not again, Dad.
Well, no, they actually they've looked out the window a couple times. Even recently, there was one place I passed by that had the white electric lines, and then cows down at the end. And they looked out and, hey, Daddy, Daddy, slow down. Look, they're doing it right. They're doing it, they're rotational grazing and all that. I'm like, oh
Fantastic.
yeah, you're right. So far they're still in that state of not being like, you know,
Okay, good. Because
uh,
they're are they seven? Did you
they just
seven?
turned 9.
Oh,
Yeah.
nine. Okay, sorry,
And
got that wrong.
oh no, you're good. And so so they still have that wonder. But yeah, I think that's part of that is that when you're in this, world, so far in, you get this peripheral, wherever you go, vision, sight, and I think there's very few examples of like seeing, you know, electric lines, which means mobile. They're
Yep.
mobilizing, as in, and that's a mimicry thing. Like I think that's the whole problem with, people are so used to seeing like open fields, for example, and I kind of loathe open fields because trees, if it's done right, managed right, actually make a field healthier for the animals and the plants and the grasses and everything.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
they cool climate, all these things. So they create microclimates. But what was I going to say about that? I feel like, oh yeah, so you know, there's this movement now. We need to move away from feedlots. Our food system's, horrific, and I know it's to make it cheap and things, and but it doesn't make it better. So, 20% of our problems right now with carbon and different things, greenhouse gas, is industrial agriculture, and it may be even more than that. But feedlots are a huge problem. So I get why there's this equal and opposite lab production system with vegetables trying to make lab-grown meat to outcompete that. But these polarities, it's not going to fix the issue, and I don't think it ever will. In fact, I'm reading a new book right now by Paul Hawken. It's called Carbon, the Book of Life, and he gives a positive spin on it, so that we don't. Obviously, we're in a bad place with carbon, and I talk about all this because trees are a solution. Obviously, one of the biggest
Exactly.
solutions we have potentially. Um, to eat carbon and create more transpiration, all these things, but and to sequester carbon. But there's this biomimicry with this mobile fencing when you see these rotational based systems that makes you see like, oh yeah, hey, it gives you a little shot of hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, for
Because it's
sure.
mimicking the buffalo and things that used to roam through here that would constantly be moving when there were less fences. So this mobile fencing is a great technology that allows us in small fenced in areas to keep them moving within that fenced in area. So you can mimic on these small models what the buffalo used to do and do the same thing basically that they did when they leave their manure and they don't over trample and the manure doesn't overpile. What happens, you see these little, and I've taken so many videos of the little dung beetles. There's a couple different kinds that move in basically the next day,
Yeah.
and start breaking it down and bringing it down into the soil, which feeds the roots. The worms come in and break it all down. Rain can wash it away better and distribute nitrogen more efficiently. Um, but then, the aggregation in the roots, you get more aggregate systems, but then that allows the blades on the plants to grow thicker and wider and then to eat more carbon and things like so. It's a necessary relationship. So obviously I'm trying to do that with cows and not buffalo, and other animals. And the pigs are drawing up seed bank that's been dormant and things and getting rid of invasives and stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's
when I
awesome.
see, but when I see those places that are few and far between, this whole flood of all this comes flooding in. So it's a little shot of hope.
I know. I love it. I just love it all. Talk about real quick, mob grazing.
Yeah, yeah. So, one of this guy, Alan Williams, he's out of Mississippi. He's uh, he's got this thing called Understanding Ag. You can sign up for on email, um, on Netflix documentaries and everything. But he's got this equation figured out that I use for you figure out your pounds per paddock per day. And so with my 10 cows, I've got it figured out that a quarter acre per day in these strips, I can move them efficiently and they'll eat everything. So the great thing about mob grazing, even my own family and stuff, they're like, why don't you just, let them out, roam over that whole thing and you'll have to work less and they can just go eat whatever they want. Problem is they go when in that they overtrample certain areas. They eat only the things that are like dessert. Like
Yeah,
if you and I were in a field of, brownies and something else, like, like bees choose sugar before they will their own honey if you give them sugar. That's like a real thing, which is crazy, right? But like that's what cows will do. They'll eat all the dessert things, leave the rest. And what happens that a lot of that bad stuff, the yellow type weeds you see a lot in overgrazed areas, they reseed and then they become more and more dominant. So mob grazing is basically a whole bunch of animals in one little spot for a short amount of time. And then you keep moving them like that. And what happens is the parasite load stays low because everything breaks down behind them. The parasites aren't crawling up on leaves and into their hoofs and things like that. So you don't have to medicate them as much. But everything's allowed to break down, the microbes, and then the plants grow quicker and faster and better behind them so that you can come back around in however many weeks to get back to that original paddock.
yeah.
Um, mhm.
And it's good for if you have trees, right? Because you can control that they're not trampling young trees.
Oh yeah. So yeah, and that's what I'm doing now. In fact, they're over there now in between two chestnut rows in one
Hmm.
of those alleyways. And I've got like a electric fencing just on the outside of those trees. And that's the other great thing about mob grazing is when you're moving them every day, they get used to you, they get calmer, they're easier to move, and they stay within their lines better. So it's kind of a beautiful thing,
Oh
really.
yeah, absolutely is. Um, so a lot of people listening to this probably are dreaming of having their own farm. I mean,
Mm,
you're doing all this right now just on 15 acres of your property, right? And so it's not like someone has to think I've got to go buy 500 acres to
right.
do a little farming, right? Um,
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
you just kind of go through how you make a livelihood? That was something I was really curious about, and we've talked about all the other great benefits, but at the end of the day, you have a mortgage and different things. So I guess you talked about the different variety of products and stuff, but if you
Yeah.
want to just throw that out there for someone listening that you can make money.
Yeah, and so the whole system farming, it can present obviously some challenges, and there's a lot of things you have to keep together in your mind and notes and planning and all that. But the thing about it is like you have to, I think the hard thing is so you have to like people, you have to educate, you have
Hmm.
to market, you have to find all these. So I'm in like special farmers markets, restaurants, and then, private customer lists I've kind of built up over time. And then I'm always like showing up in these other worlds too, between, music and church and all these other little communities, and they all, intertwine. And so, I feel like it's hard, I think we often get locked into like having to like the only thing you can do is like be on the land and don't have time to do all those other things. You can't, but you have to do all those, you have to do it all. And so until you get to a place where you can, I guess, hire, and have interns, which I'm starting to have a few of those situations for help and things. But
That's a good
so
point.
one of the gospels I like to preach is the whole percentage-based system. Um, so biomimicry to do it in the way I like to do it, and in my opinion is like a good way to do it with these whole systems and mimic, following the natural world, is that it's slow incrementally, but it is a steady growth. So I think you have to prepare your mind to be okay or happy enough with a certain amount, and then have a goal to get to a certain place. So I'm edging closer to that. The first couple years are the hardest
Yeah.
because often land needs restored or it's hard to afford and all these things. Um, but it's an incredible, you know, the land does regenerate incredibly fast in a way too. I haven't reseeded over there at all, and that particular 15 acres you're talking about where all my grazing stuff is happening. Um, I have it's not it's been through. So before I started over there 3 years ago on that particular plot, because I've been farming the woods and all the other pastures adjoining that area. Uh, but what happened is, so it's been corn and soy at one time. This is 10 years ago. And then it was an alfalfa. And then it was a monoculture of this invasive pear tree that took over. And it was the only thing growing there. I mean, nothing under them was growing. Uh,
Wow.
and so I haven't spent any money on reseeding. And in just 2 years, I mean, I've counted, there's like 30 different grasses that are edible for cows. I did run the pigs and through a couple paddocks to drop seed bank and things. But anyway, so I'm trying to say is eventually you get to, so industrial farming is making 15% USDA dollars. That's what they're getting back. Now, few people are making money. It's because they're renting out thousands of acres. So it's the Walmart model, right? Um, Now, everything I do, it took a couple years, but honey, for example, I make 90% now back on my money on whatever I make. I make elderberry syrup with that honey, so that's a value-added product. So I make 2.5 times more than a bottle of honey on the elderberry syrup. So that's an extra little jolt. But it's following kind of like the blooms, right? This thing and then this thing and then this. So it is kind of following that cycle. Um,
Of nature.
Animals and meat, and I'm trying to create short-term, mid-term, long-term, not just on the land, but I'm trying to do that and spiritually, but financially as well. And hence the chestnuts, they're in that kind of that long-term sort of canopy, that third tier. And so, but I needed to build the soil with the animals. The meat is healthy, well cared for. It's needed now. It's necessary, so people are into it as well.
Well, yeah, because now we're customers, and I can just say it's, we do not like the idea of having any meat from the traditional model. So when I found you, who found me first, it's like this circle of community to be so excited to have some cow and pig that is just phenomenal. And I want to make sure we share your information for anyone that's in the Bowling Green, Kentucky area,
Yeah.
to reach out. But yeah, fantastic. Because, we don't all have to do the same thing. I think that's one of the things I love about community is you're doing all these things, I'm doing things over here, and we come together as a community. And I think that's just part of your whole life story is being out connected and sharing the vision and the love and then also what you're doing. Um,
Yeah, very cool. Before we move to the next question, there's something I just thought about with that. I feel like, so within each of those, let's say just the pigs, well, economically, I'm making 35% on them, which is still a fair bit higher than the 15%. And that will increase more over time. And I sort of have the percentage for everything figured out. And most of that is improving. So that will grow more over time too. The more efficient the pastures get, the more, things like this.
yeah.
Um, but the added, it's with, so I try to find three things within each of those. And it's like, you can sell individual cuts at special markets and things, but selling them in shares, and then you can do, I've started to do things like with bone broths and things like that, but it's not, so it's always trying to just figure out what three things for each of these crops or what three things for each of these, the meat,
Yeah.
and can I do? And it's surprising how, you know, the community that's built in all this is just it's staggering. I mean, it's overwhelming just the joy that I get from the community that's building that stays consistent, because once you build this certain amount of credibility, once you create this certain amount of nutrition, and it's fair price too, for what, like if when
Totally.
I go to Myers down here and I buy grass-fed beef, which is different than grass-finished beef. So what I do is grass-finished, and there's a restaurant in Nashville buying from me because of it. It's hard to find that.
Yeah.
Because grass fed means they could be just on a pasture eating one type of grass, which is okay. It's better than, they could be over trampling the ground, all that. But it doesn't say grass finished, which means they could be still finishing them off on grain, and cows were never meant to eat grain. I mean, I know it makes it easier to maybe certain steaks on the grill because of the, or whatever to cook, but the cow's not as healthy, you're not as healthy, the land's not as healthy. That's what else, the last thing I'll say is that people say, well, if you're able to move all your meat right now, why don't you just get more, and do more, have more pigs, have more cows. Problem with that is it's the pounds per paddock thing. You start overtaxing the land because the pigs will tear up ground pretty fast. And you can't rotate them back on one patch for a year and a half later. So what happens is if, you know, I have 30 pigs instead of 15 a year, now I'm really going to have to either find more ground, or just like totally make it into it becomes like this overgraze, this
Hmm.
feedlot situation, where you're having to deal with more parasites. The ground's not going to come back, the grasses and the roots and all that they need. Um, so that's part of it,
Yeah. And there's only so many hours in a day. I mean, if you're trying to maximize three different
that too.
products for each thing, and do concerts and market and
Right,
everything. Yeah, it's
right.
it's just so delightful what you're doing. It really inspired me, as I've told you. And so if someone wants to get a hold of you, I mean, do you do some consulting? Would you do some consulting if people are interested or?
Yeah, so I have done some of that, and I enjoy that. And partly, you have to keep like so yeah, I'm available to do that, and I've done a few of those on site, and it is fun to do that because it's when you see different pieces of ground, you start to try to imagine what needs to be there, or what could be there, and there needs to be more regenerative farming. And so I'm always
Absolutely.
a proponent of like, let's do this, please do this. And there's been a few people getting into it. One guy called me yesterday, works for NPR uh, here in town. He's kind of the voice of NPR radio. Wanted to do a story on regenerative farming, but he's like wanting to do some stuff on a little piece of his ground, and everything. And
Oh, we
I'm
hear it
always like,
every day. People come and buy trees, and so
mm,
many of them just have the desire to do more and more. And that's a great thing for the earth, teaching our kids and those of us that are in a position to tell the stories and the successes we must. And that's why we're here. So I guess the last question is for listeners who want to follow in your footsteps, do you have like just any last minute tips or things for them to contemplate?
yeah, I feel like that's one of those questions of there's this movement, there's this gravitation towards wanting to wanting to move towards these sort of models in the future. And I've seen so many young people want to, and then they'll get into it, whether it's beekeeping, or running a couple pigs, but then you get so far in, and I've seen them sort of just kind of tail off or get, out. And so I guess my piece of advice, and I went through that transition, except for I just stuck with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because it was such. I don't know if it was to a certain point in my life. I love nature so much, or what have you. But I would definitely say, stay. I've had to learn to stop preaching. It's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of, um, you know, things like I had to move away from like negative because like I realized that I have to say, stay inspired, because it's a great office, you're making things more healthy, you're more healthy. It creates this great community, the list, all the things we've talked about already. Uh, I think, um, and I learned those first couple years, things get easier in this model as you go because things get hardy on their own. They start like it's more about pruning. It's getting to be more where it's about maintenance and pruning versus like putting in all the infrastructure and all this
Yeah.
hard front end effort. And so if you can get through that, it's kind of like an endurance runner. And there's still really hard days where you have to have that find that deep down wherewithal to continue. But like you do build that muscle. And so I would say that's the most important thing and is to get past all those failures and let the failures be a teacher because they are a great teacher and necessary and the solution is in the problem. I stole that from Paul
I like that.
Hawkins' new
I like
book.
that.
Um, but yeah, and I think lastly, I would just say well, so they're working on a documentary on the farm right now. I think it's going to be called The Last Paddock. They've got, they're
For your
working on
farm,
it.
right?
Yes, with the pigs
Okay.
and kind of this
Hmm.
journey, but it's based on the sentimental value and the animal husbandry aspect of it. Um, and so we see all these models of like, and often they don't, it's hard to work because they're scare tactics but they're also great. I love them. All these documentaries coming out about carbon sequestration and what we're doing to our soils. That's necessary. But there's few examples about this whole, I grew up in logging camps out in Idaho, literally. So like, and my family is this long line of just, it's, I guess, kind of that rough kind of,
Yeah. Aren't your parents firefighters right now?
yeah, they were retired firefighting out
Yeah.
west. Yeah, just did. And so, um, it's not, I think there's this disconnect. Like, so I think you have to gain a certain amount of ruggedness. But this documentary is showing that you can be rugged, you can be wild, you can do all these things, but also professional, also poetic, caring, kind. Because now I'm a tree hugger. I mean, I believe in good management, obviously. But I'm just saying, like, this journey, it's an extraordinary journey through. I've been through all these models of industrialism and extraction and things that weren't the greatest of models. My family was smaller, so they did things in a better way than like the big logging operations. But um, that time in the forest maybe sparked a certain amount of love for the forest and respect for the trees. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe it was birthed there a little bit, and then it can turn into this. But like, um, so I feel like you can be, you know, all these things. It's a mix. It's like the diversity is the key, right? And then I'll
Yeah.
finish. Diversity is the key in not just soil and the land, but in our community and as people, and within our own set of skills and how we inspire ourselves to prevent loneliness, to create wherewithal, to create a certain amount of endurance, and to create, our own sense of joy and imagination, health. And then there's one last thing I wanted to say. And to create this sense of like care and gentleness, and that you can be both. And I feel like that's the voice we need to hear because yes, I'm as rugged as it gets, but I'm also deeply caring and sentimental and like and feel and can and gaining this sense of intuitiveness that we've lost that the natives used to have this native intelligence. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll
Yeah.
just
Like
end there.
when I asked you if it was difficult, I see your girls playing with the pigs that we know we're buying a share of and they will have an end of life. Was it difficult for you? And you're said of heck yeah, it's difficult. But
Oh, yeah, it kills
it's
me every
just
time.
you
But
know, it's part of it's part of the system. It's 1,000 times better than how our food system is right now in the United States when it comes to, well, to so many things that relate to animals, even vegetables too. But
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah, and we have this 4th of July hog roast, which I'm sending the invites out soon, so you'll be getting one of those.
okay.
But it's just this great, around 70 people come. We have this potluck. We take the pig in the field to and but it's so real and genuine. Everybody's on a high for a couple months. I mean,
Yeah.
afterward, it's just this remarkable connectivity. And this pig is eating roots and shoots and, buried walnuts and just like, I mean, they're happy, so which matters for the meat. And if I was a pig that had to like be turned into meat, I guess you could say, I would choose this farm every day. I mean, if you know what I mean? So, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we'll try to do some social media posts on that event too, just to share in the joy of it. But boy, I sure do appreciate your time today, and I hope the listeners enjoy this as much as I have. So thank you, Willie.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm really thankful for you and Brad and what you're doing. And so yes, please keep up the good work there. I'm telling everybody about y'all and go
Thank
get your
you.
chestnuts up there. And so
Appreciate it.
yeah, so thank you for having me. I enjoyed it, and I look forward to watching your other episodes of branching out.
Thanks, Willie. Okay, talk
All
soon.
right. All right.